Hi everyone, welcome back to Empire Build Academy. It's Fabian, and today I've got an interesting video. I've called it Refines for Dummies. Really, it's refines for me, because I always get confused by the refines, by attack percentages, by flat refines, all the different things that come with this. So I thought, why not make a video? Refines for Dummies. This is it. So welcome back to the channel. Like I say, this is Refines for Dummies on Evony. I'm sure many of us have had moments where we're just like, I don't get it, I do get it, I think I've now got it, and then realised you haven't got it, and well, maybe it's just me, I don't know. But this is where I'm at. This is where I'm trying to make a video that I can understand. And if I can understand it, then I think there's going to be thousands of you out there that can also understand this process. So this is the Evony PC scene. I always say PC scene. I don't really know why I say that every time. But basically, you may see this a little bit different to the way you have it on mobile versus the PC. So let's get straight into it and try and understand once and for all basically what refines are and what's the difference between percentages versus flats. To decide between flat and percentage refines, you've got to first understand how buffs work in Evony. That's the first part. Every troop type, ground, mounted, ranged and siege, has base stats for attack, defence and HP. These base stats are universal across all players and form the foundation for the buffs for your army. When you see your troop stats in game, like those for the T14 troops in your barracks, they're displayed in green, showing the nominal stats. So let's go over to the mounted. I think that's a good one to use, is the mounted. And if we go into train, you can see these are the different troops that we've got. So you can see the stats here that we've got, and you notice that some are in green and some are in white. So what are the buffs in Evony is the first thing we need to know. In Evony, every troop type, ground, mounted, ranged and siege, has base stats for attack, defence and HP, and that's what you can see here going down, where I've got the 29,000, 23,000, 65,000. These are fixed numbers, and actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to come off the T14s and I'm going to use the T1s as a better example, because that is what we're looking to do, is try and work out what the percentage is versus the flat on a T1 mounted. That's how I'm going to try and break this down. And I'm also going to try and, where I can, use easier numbers to make it more simple, because when you start multiplying 1, 3, 4, 9, 2, 2, 5, all this kind of stuff, it can make things just a little bit more trickier than it needs to be. So, like I say, when you check this, you'll see green numbers for the attack, defense, and HP. You'll also notice that for the load as well. These are your nominal stats, which include base stats, the starting values for each troop tier. So the green numbers mean that the stat is variable, and you can increase it with different types of buffs. So the white numbers, like ranged or speed, they are fixed, though some, i.e. the speed, can be adjustable with specific books, but that is something I'm not going to go into too much today. So flats versus percentage, the basics. When you refine gear like civilization or Parthian gear for your generals, you can choose between flat refines, and let's go and actually choose one of these now so you can see that what I'm talking about. So let's go into my general, which is Queen Boudica, although I am looking to change this person very, very soon. If you've been watching my other videos, I am saving up a lot of tokens and I'm hoping to change. So let's go into Queen Boudica. I was going the wrong way there, playing a different game altogether today. And I'm still going the wrong place because I'm not concentrating. So in generals, and if we go down to Queen Boudica, this is her. These are the different stats. And when I was talking about the equipment, this is where we are at. So when we say that you can use flats or percentages. Flat refines, which are these numbers here, no percentage mark next to it, so the 962, the 1057 and the 1056. These are a fixed number that is added to a stat, e.g. 724 to mounted defense, and these are the same for all the troop tiers. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing T1 or T16, which I will never ever own on this game. It doesn't matter which one you're doing it on, that number will always stay the same. And if I go into refine here, you can see what I'm talking about. So on troop attack, you can see that 1096 is the top number. Can't change. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether, again, I'll repeat it, it doesn't matter whether you're doing that for T16 troops, T15, T6, T1. The maximum number you can have is that 1096. Percentage refines, and I don't know why I've got a food gathering speed on that. Well, I do, but I've just been a bit lazy lately. So let's go into another one that has the defense on there. Just bear with me 1 second. This one is perfect. So you can see we've got mounted troop defense there, ×3, all the way down. And the percentage one at the end there is between 1 and 30%. So what we need to do with the percentage stats, and this is probably where it gets a little bit more tricky, is we need to multiply the base stat by a percentage. So e.g. 30%, although 25% is probably more realistic to do. These scale with the troops base stat, so they're bigger for higher tiers, and that's where the confusion lies. Because if I was only running maximum T1 troops, and I'm doing a T1 trap, and I've hardly got anything on the high tier, so I wouldn't want the percentage refines if I was only training T1 with very minimal high tier. But that would change if I wanted to have, say, become a T1 defense, where actually not only do I have the T1 troops, but I've also got a large portion of higher tiers, then those higher tiers are going to make a difference to your overall stats. And the key difference, to try and explain this in a dummies guide, flats are better for lower tier troops, T1 to T10, because their base stats are small, so a flat boost makes a bigger impact. Whereas percentages are better for higher tier troops, T11 to T16, because their large base stats get a bigger boost from the percentages. And the example we can use, T1 versus T14 mounted defense. So here is the math that we're going to try and do, and this is not necessarily my forte, so please do bear with me, but I'm really going to try and simplify this. So you might find that the next 5 minutes I'm going over things until I find a way of trying to explain this much easier. And obviously, if there's anything I say that is incorrect, then please do jump into the comments and get involved, because it might be that I don't get this right or I don't get my message across well, but it might be that someone out there, like you guys, can explain it better. And that's good. That's what we want. So you can see here that the flat refine max is 724. And if we took that 724 and we added that to the 150, the base stat, you can see that we've now got 874. But if I took those 724 and I times that by 4, you can see that we would get 2,896 extra on the defense flat base rate. But if we was to do that on a percentage, and we'll do the same again, so we'll calculate 30% of 150, which is 150 times 0.3%. That would then give us 45, and then we times that by 4. You can see that would get an extra 180 defense. So from a flat refine versus percentage refine, there's not even an argument as to which one is better for T1 troops. It's 100% the flat refine. And it's actually almost 16 times more effective to do that. So if you are running with just T1 mounted troops with very little of those higher tier troops, because you've really concentrated just purely being on a T1 trap, not T1 defense, and I did a video about that yesterday, about what the difference is between the two, then you can see why you would want the flat refines for that. But this time what we're going to do is we're going to actually use the T14 troops, and there's a lot of guides that you can go and follow to find out what the base stat is for the different troops. I think there's one on Evony Wiki, I think they've got one, and there may be some more floated around. I know quite a few people have made the spreadsheets, which is a little bit above my pay scale because I am terrible when it comes to Excel and things like that, which is why I'm still struggling with my Evony account today, because I don't understand all these things necessarily as well as other people. But what I do know is the base stat for the T14 mounted is 4,400. So if we've got 4,400 and then we add that to the 724 flat that we would be getting from the flat percentage, from the flat buff, that would give us 5,124. And again, if we did that 4 times 724, then we'd end up with still that 2,896 defense. It's not going to change. It's still going to be the same. It doesn't matter whether that's T1, T15. But if we was to take those 4,400 base stat for the T14 mounted defense, and this time we did that same maths again of timesing it by the 30%, you can see that we now get 1,320. And if we took that 1,320 and times that by 4, you can see now that we're getting 5,280 extra defense versus the 2,896 that we was getting for the flat refine. So I'm going to try and explain it again. Even when I'm saying it, it still sounds quite foreign, but to try and do it again, let's have a look at it again. Let's go over it again. So a flat refine, 724, times it by 4, because that's the maximum you can get, giving you a maximum of 2,896 extra defense for the flat refine. That's the maximum. We can't get away from that. It's going to be 2,896, no matter if we're doing T1 or T16. Let's just go right there with the top. That is the maximum defense we're going to get, is 2,896 added. Now, if you're doing that and you've got T1 troops, perfect. But when we're doing that with the higher tier troops, they come with a higher base stat. They don't come with that 150 anymore. They now come with 4,400. And then that 4,400 and timesing that by that 30% is now giving us 1,320 extra. And then when you go and do that on all 4, all of a sudden, you've got that extra 5,280 extra defense. So if you had very little in the way of T1 troops and you were going big in terms of the T1 defense, and now you've got lots of the higher tier, you can see why this would make more sense to be having the percentage. We can use the same argument for our attack troops. And if I go over to my rally spot, actually, and let's have a look at a March preset over here. So I'll just go straight to Marcus Agrippa. So you can see Marcus Agrippa is only going to be running with these high tiers because the bottom stuff is minimal. It's just layers. So when I go into Marcus Agrippa and I check him out, which I can do now, let's go into my generals. Let's go to Marcus Agrippa. What I should be expecting to see, and I hope it is the case when I click on them, you should be seeing the percentage base refine. So you can see the difference between the flat and the percentage. And I just did something else as well, just to see if this can also put it in our minds a little bit better. So this, you can see, is the flat versus percentage. And the first one there is the T1 mounted, and it's got that 150 base stat for the defense, and 724 is what we would get from the flat maximum for each of the 4 slots on the particular weapon. So if we did 724 times 4, we would get a total of 2,896 in defense that would go towards that T1 mounted. But if we did it with the T14 mounted, that base stat is incredibly enlarged to 4,400, and that is a significant increase. And when we do the 4,400 by 30%, it gives us a base stat of 1,320. Now that 1,320 versus the 724, we can already see that timesing this by 4, it's going to give us a significant extra amount, 5,280 extra for defense. So I also decided to throw in a T6 mounted as well. Went and got the base stat off the guides that you can find online that I mentioned earlier. The base stat for the T6 mounted is 660, and if we times that by the 30%, gives us a base stat of 198. If we then multiply that stat of 198 by 4, it will give us an extra 792 for defense. So you can see that if you were to use the percentage on T6 mounted or T1 mounted, it's not going to be as good as using the flat refine of that 724 times 4. But as soon as you start touching those high tier troops and you multiply it by that 30% with that bigger increase of that base stat, that is where it makes a big difference in terms of using the percentage. So if you're going T10, T11, T12 plus, you need to do those percentages, find out which one is better. And I think really, for argument's sake, anything above T11, you're probably going to go with the percentage. And that's why we use those percentages. And I'm just going to go back to the game itself. Let me just jump over there. And as I said, if I was using this for my generals to attack, that's why I'd want to see percentage on all of these. And I know I've got some that are flat, which doesn't make sense, but that's because I haven't gone into there with my refined stones and used the relevant gold, etc., for them to do that. So that is for that. And again, I'm going to try and break it down in a different way for you. So the percentages gives 5,280 versus the flats 2,896. Percentages are better for T14s. For percentages, if the boost, example 1,320 for T14, is higher than the flat refine percentages, then percentages are better without needing to add that base stat for that. When to use flats or percentages? For wall defense, T1 trap or layered defense, T1 trap keeps. If your defense is a T1 mounted trap with 200 to 300k T1s with thin upper tier layers, then you would want to go with the flat refines because you just don't have enough of the higher tier to be making a difference. T1s have a tiny base stat, that 150 that we was talking about earlier, so flats like 724 make a huge difference when you throw that on there. And this is why T1 traps rely on massive troop counts to leverage those flat buffs. So that is the key here. You've got to be running small layers at the top end of your troops that you have in your keep. Whereas if you was doing a layered defense, so this is high tiers, and your keep has T12 to T15 troops at those higher levels, then you would want to potentially be using percentage refines. These boost your stronger troops, for example T14s, with that 4,400 defense more effectively. Even with 200 to 300k T1s, percentages help if you have significant T13 plus layers. For PvP marches, so what I was showing you here, with Marcus Agrippa, upper tier marches rely on higher tier troops, so percentage refines are best here because they scale with the larger base stats of T12+. For example, the T14 archers have 4,444 as a base stat, fully buffed, and percentages boost these significantly. They make a massive difference to those higher tiers. The exception for this is with small siege marches. So for T11 siege march, flats can actually end up being better. For example, T11 siege attack base 1940 would give you a flat plus the 513 and give you a total of 2453. And the percentage would be 1940 times 0.3, which would give you 582, which would then in turn 582 plus that 1940 give you 2522. So the 2522 versus the 2453, the percentages are slightly better, and flats, as you know, can't be debuffed. So a safer choice if you are going to go with that T11 siege attack. So you can already see that it can be really, really complicated to understand and get this. But the way I'm trying to understand this is we have three scenarios. We have your T1 trap, your T1 defense, and then your PvP marches. With your PvP marches, you're going to go with the percentage buffs. All of these should be percentage, and when I click on there, that one is good, but I can probably get some of these higher because 18.2% isn't utilizing that as much as it should be, because of course this goes up to the 30%. So there is definitely a lot of work that I can do on this. On the next one, you can see again, I'm not really utilizing what I should be doing. If I go into that actually and click on the refine for this, you can see that that is poor. I need to do some serious work on getting these higher, because those extra percentages that I'm missing out on, I'm missing out on nearly 17% on that first one. And that just goes to show you how much I haven't done with my marches for Marcus Agrippa. So I really do genuinely need to do some work. And this is why I struggle at all the different things and why I've made this particular video, because now, coming to the end of this video, I now got some information to say, hang on a minute, now I know why I'm not really doing great when it comes to attacking. Because even in this one, if I go into this one, you can see, again, okay, I've got three that are in the yellow stroke gold, but one of them's a flat. We don't want that. We need that out of there. I need to get rid of it. There's a mounted troop in there as well. And again, that's not something that should be in there. So from a March perspective, PvP March, they should all be percentages. They should all be based on the relevant troop type. So for this one, it would be archers. There's a lot of work for me to do there. And also, let's just come off that. But when going to Queen Boudica, and someone made a really good valid point on one of my videos yesterday, actually, where they turned around and said, I'm literally smack bang in the middle between a T1 trap and a T1 defense. So I kind of need to do something different, because I've got Queen Boudica, who is useful for the higher tier troops. And let's go into having a look at her. So you can see increases in-city ground troops and mounted troops HP by 15% and in-city mounted troop attack by 30%. But again, we're using percentages, and those percentages are only going to be useful if I have higher tier in there. And I know someone said to me before, you don't have enough high tier troops to make Queen Boudica relevant on my keep, on my wall. And they're right. I need to change that. So going into, again, my T1, let's go and have a look at the mounted. And again, we'll go to my T1, and you will see that for a T1 trap, I have nowhere near enough of the T1 troops to be doing anything there. But when I go to the higher tiers, and we go into the 14s, I've got a lot of 14s because obviously I use that for killing monsters and stuff. But underneath that, there's really nothing under there, because I was in between the T1 trap, T1 defense, didn't really understand what was what, how each worked, and that's where I've gone wrong with that. So there is a lot of work for me to do on this account that I've realized I've done wrong. But let's go back to this, and let's go back to this, and finish it up with the flat versus percentage. And I've used mounted as an example, but obviously you can use this method to be doing this for the other ones as well. T1 mounted comes with a base stat of 150. The flat refine comes with a maximum stat of 724. If I get that 724 and I have it multiplied by 4 across the 4 different ones, then that would give me a flat stat of 2,896, which can be added onto that 150. If I had T14 mounted, it comes with a huge 4,400 defense base stat. And that's the key here, it's the base stat. And then if we times that base stat by 30%, we would then get 1,320. And if we were then to times that by 4, because remember we'd now have 30% on all of them, that would give us an extra 5,280 extra for the T14 mounted. So T14 mounted 5,280 versus T14 mounted using the flat, where it's only giving me 2,896. I'm missing out. And then I've used the T6 mounted as well for an example. And that gives us a base stat. If we use the 660 that it comes with, and we times again that by the 30%, gives us a base stat of 198, and then if we multiply that by 4, would give us 792. So again, anything when you start going into those higher tiers, you can see how much it significantly increases. So flat versus refine, PvP marches should all have that percentage refine, and if you were looking at it from a defensive point of view and you had loads of T1 mounted troops, or depending on what you are, you may be range, you may be siege, I'm not sure. But again, it's taken into consideration, what do you have more of? Do you have loads and loads of T1 mounted, you're in the 300 millions, you're in the 500 millions, and you only have layers above of the higher tiers, then you are a trap account, a proper trap account, and you're going to benefit from using flat refines. I noticed there I put flat versus refine. That's supposed to be flat versus percentage. I'm sure many people will point that out in the comments. But if you were someone with a decent amount of T1 troops, but you've got quite a significant amount of higher troops at the top end, and I'm talking millions, then you're going to benefit more from having the percentage buffs, not the flat. And that is where I'm going to leave this. It's actually, doing this video has actually made it a little bit more clearer for me what I'm doing wrong, when I should be using flat versus the percentage. And now I can go and run away with that and actually do that and put that in action on my keep. Now, what I ask you guys out there to do for me as well, there are plenty of things I still miss in these videos. I know I do. And there's been some really, really, really good comments lately from the community, from the Evony community, that has give even more additional advice to what I'm saying. So there are things that I could have got wrong. There could be things that I've misunderstood, or there could be things that I could have said in a better way. And if you have that information and you've got that, drop it in the comments. Let's see that in the comments, so that not only does it help me with my account, but also it can help out hundreds of other people that potentially may see this video and help them out too. Especially, as I said, if I've got something wrong, then of course, please do correct me. So I'm going to leave that video here. That's where I'm done for the Evony refines for dummies. And hopefully this has helped out one person, because if I've helped out one person, my job is done with this video. Do please help and support the channel by subscribing to me, and I will see you in another Evony video very, very soon. Thanks for watching.